I spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about how puff pastry is made. The layers it requires, how you put butter in between, you roll it, put another layer of butter, roll the pastry again, until you end up with several layers of very, very densely packed pastry. That's why when you put it in the oven, it puffs up and creates that nice texture. And it's this line of thinking that led me into developing or building on the previous marble tutorials that we've done. Welcome to the puff pastry version of how I create the marble technique. For this, we'll need our usual accoutrements. Going all French now. We need very, very, very cheap baby wipes, as cheap as you could possibly find. Now, although I can't give a comprehensive view on every single wet wipe that exists in the world, I've often found, or it's been reported to me, that the cheapest is often best. We dry the cheap wet wipe, and then we stretch it across a black surface. This technique is for a black marble tutorial. We then cover the surface with our white plus silver mixture. Now you can modulate it exactly how much white to silver is in the mixture. Here I've used 50-50. For this I've used Madeira Combat White and Model Colour, the real metallic range silver. But any light silver will do us in this situation. Don't feel hidebound, don't feel like you have to go out and buy this particular paint to get this effect. If you have chrome, if you have any light silver effects or silver paints, it's more than adequate to use for this. Okay, next up I take the same sheet, spread it out slightly more until I create finer veins, and make sure that the wet wipe is completely dry at this point. We don't want to use wet wipes, we need it to be completely and utterly dry. Then I spread that out over the surface, and I want the majority of the surface to be black with silvery white lines, not the other way around. So there's large gaps in between the veins that we've created. Next up I'm using, now I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this, Stinrelex? Stinel Rex. It's a new primer I'm trying out from Badger. It's been recommended to me after, unfortunately, Scale 75 has stopped producing their primer. It feels like every time I recommend something it gets discontinued, but this stuff has been around for a while and hopefully it will stay around for a while longer. After a recommendation, I can't help but feel like giving it the kiss of death. But why a primer here? Well, this layer we need it to be quite a bit thicker than the first layer. We need the paint to be quite thick on application. We need to dry it fully with a hairdryer and then lift off the wet wipe to reveal this lovely marbling pattern. But now I want to complicate this pattern even further. I'm using the same wet wipe and pressing it against the surface, and you'll notice that the wet wipe has become hardened with the paint accumulation on there, and we can use this like a stencil. Now I'm using the stencil to create a more complex, varied pattern. You can see with some of the veins they didn't come out quite right, or there's too much silver there. So I can go back over it, and again, going back to our analogy of the butter pastry, well, we can layer this technique. So not only is it just adding a wet wipe on top then spraying, well, we can do something a bit more complex. Next up, the experimental phase. I wanted stronger white lines. I'm taking a clean wet wipe, I've added it to the surface of the Dreadnought drop pod, and I've sprayed white over the top. Now these veins didn't come out quite delicate enough for me, so that's why I'm wiping my finger over the surface of it to try and remove the majority of the paint. It's a very similar methodology to how we described the black marble in the Essential series, how you used like a big thick dollop of paint, then you've removed it. It's a very similar process here, only we haven't added gloss varnish and other additives into the mixture. It probably would have made this process a lot easier to achieve, but I just wanted to try something out. Now, in order to give me these veined effects, I'm airbrushing it on and removing the majority of it with a cheap synthetic chisel brush. Again, this tutorial is, well, apart from the materials, apart from the actual Dreadnought drop pod itself, the cheaper the materials you use, the better. You don't want to be using your fine Winsor & Newton brushes for this procedure because we're using them quite aggressively. As you can see here, before the paint is utterly dried, I'm wiping it across, and I'm using kind of the chaotic pattern. I'm not going in with any pre-designed notions of where I want the veins to be. I'm airbrushing it on, and I'm actively engaging with the material in front of me. So the white at the top of the segment there, it came out slightly too white, and I'll show you, going back to our puff pastry analogy, how we refine that more. The last of the refinement phases, I'm using the black initial stenciled wet wipe, and I'm airbrushing black over it again. Again, just to knock back the more aggressive veins that we've created. You may notice that this panel is a different panel from what I've used up to this point. I wish I could say it was a masterstroke and to say how we can demonstrate this on many different surfaces, but I got them confused. Consummate artist that I am. But I'm using exactly the same black, PSI running at 20. I'm using the custom Micron, which is probably the best airbrush I've ever used, by Iwata. This thing can paint eyeballs on a gnat. Essentially here I'm just eyeballing it, making sure that any irregular patterns, anything that doesn't quite look right, I'm just airbrushing over to reinforce that black. And that's it! A more complex black marble effect, more suitable for large open flat surfaces like the Dreadnought drop pod. Thank you very much for watching. I wanted to give you guys a palette cleanser because we've just had a big tutorial from the Blood Angels Legion champion, who has been given a field promotion to a full Praetor. Next up, we'll be getting into the Sanguinius series, where true metallic, non-metallic, etc. Thank you very much, guys, for watching, and I will catch you in the next hefty lot of video tutorials. Thank you!